A dart hissed past my ear and struck the throne behind me, and that was the moment my quiet evening turned into the longest 9 minutes of my life. My name is Daniel Whitmore, and until 6 months ago, I studied strange life forms on distant planets for a living. Now I was standing in a palace made of black stone, holding a ceremonial spear I barely knew how to use, guarding a queen who was not even human. Let me back up for a second, because none of this makes sense without a little context, and I promise I will not slow down for long. I had joined the exploratory service to catalog new worlds, not to protect royalty. But when our ship docked at the Kael'thi home station for supply and trade talks, the reigning queen, Vezrai, walked through the greeting hall and looked straight past 12 of her own finest soldiers. She stopped in front of me. "This one," she said, pointing one long clawed finger at my chest. The chamberlain, a nervous official with too many eyes and not enough patience, nearly dropped his staff. "Your Majesty, he is human. He has no training in our ways. Our finest warriors stand ready to serve you." "I did not ask for your finest warriors," the queen said. "I asked for the only person in this hall whose heartbeat did not change when I entered." She was right. Every guard in that room had gone stiff with nerves the moment she walked past. I had not, because after 6 months of first contact meetings with creatures who spoke in flashing colors and clicking sounds, a tall queen with sharp claws barely registered as strange anymore. So that is how I ended up standing beside her throne that evening, wearing armor that did not quite fit, holding a spear I had touched for the first time an hour earlier, while real soldiers stared at me with open frustration. 9 minutes into my very first watch, 3 visitors entered the hall for evening audience. They moved like ordinary petitioners waiting their turn, but something about their walk felt wrong, too smooth, too steady, too focused on one single point in the room, the queen herself. I had spent years training as a young man before I ever left Earth, learning to notice small details, the kind of details that save lives. Old instincts do not fade easily, even when you trade a uniform for a star chart. "Get down," I shouted, and pushed the queen sideways off her throne, just as the first dart shot past where her throat had been a heartbeat earlier. The hall exploded into motion. Guards trained for formal duels suddenly faced 3 strangers who fought with no rules at all, hidden blades, sudden smoke, and one small device that dropped a nearby guard to the floor with a single flash of light. I had no weapon except that long ceremonial spear, a decoration until 60 seconds ago. But a decoration is only useless if you decide it is. The first attacker rushed toward me, reaching for a second blade. I swept the long end of the spear low and knocked him off balance before he could bring it up, and he crashed hard onto the stone floor. The second one came fast, swinging a thin cord that crackled with energy at its tip. I stopped thinking of the spear as a fancy court object and thought of it only as a long, solid pole. I drove the blunt end straight into his chest, with everything years of physical training had built into my arms, and he folded over and dropped without another step forward. The third attacker was smarter. He jumped over the fallen throne, heading straight for the queen, blade turned downward, aimed low at her back while she was still trying to rise from the floor. There was no time to swing the spear again, so I threw it, end over end, the way no instructor would ever recommend throwing a 9-foot pole. It spun through the air and caught him across the shoulder, knocking him sideways and sending him sliding across the smooth floor a few feet from where the queen knelt. Silence followed, the kind that rings in your ears after too much noise all at once. The queen looked up at me from the ground, folded into a position no human spine could copy, her mandibles clicking in an expression I had not yet learned to read. "You threw the spear," she said, sounding more curious than upset. "It was that. Or watch someone get too close to you, Your Majesty." Throwing it felt like the better manners. The other guards finally reached the 3 attackers and pulled them to their knees. And this next part is the piece of the story that still surprises me every time I think about it. The 3 men begged, but not toward the queen. They turned toward me. "We surrender to the human," one of them said, speaking broken trade language, hands raised in my direction instead of hers. Not to the guards, to him. I found out later exactly why. Among their group, a band of hired fighters from the far edge of known space, surrender had a strict rule. You had to yield to whoever had actually stopped you in the fight, or the surrender did not count at all. Giving up to the wrong person was seen as a lie, and lying about surrender back among their own group meant a punishment far worse than anything the palace guards might have given them. 3 armed and trained fighters, sent to remove a queen, had been stopped within about 10 seconds by a spear throw, a solid hit to the chest, and 1 careful shove at exactly the right moment. 6 months earlier, I had been recording the light patterns of small sea creatures on a quiet ocean world. Life takes strange turns. Queen Vesrai rose slowly from the floor and straightened her long robes with the same calm dignity she always carried, as if being tackled by her own guard only minutes earlier had not happened at all. She looked down at the 3 kneeling men with something close to amusement in the way her mandibles moved. "You came here to remove a queen," she said, "and you were stopped by her decoration." Then she turned toward me, and for the first time since I had arrived at her court, I recognized the pattern of clicks she made. She was laughing. "Chamberlain," she said, still watching me, "you may stop searching for a permanent captain of my royal guard." The Chamberlain, still pale from the excitement, bowed low enough that his staff scraped against the floor. "As you wish, Majesty." "And the human guard?" "The human," she said, "just earned a new title he never asked for." I let out a long breath, picked my spear back up off the smooth stone floor, and realized my quiet life of cataloging strange worlds had just changed direction completely. Word of what happened that night spread quickly through the station. By morning, other officials from neighboring systems had heard the story, and a few of them came to see the human guard everyone was suddenly talking about. I found it strange how fast news traveled among people who had never met me, yet somehow already knew my name. The Queen called me to her private chamber the next day, a quiet room with tall windows looking out over the station gardens. She sat calmly, studying me the way someone studies a puzzle they are slowly working out. "You do not carry yourself like a soldier," she said, "yet you moved faster than every soldier in that hall." "I trained for years before I ever left home," I answered. "I just never expected to use any of it again." "Instinct does not forget," she said, "even when the mind moves on to other things." She explained that the attack had not been random. A rival house within her own court had grown tired of her peaceful trade agreements with outside worlds, agreements that reduced their private profits from older, less fair trade routes. They had hired outside fighters because using their own soldiers would have exposed their involvement immediately. They believed a distracted queen, surrounded by ceremonial guards more skilled at parades than protection, would be an easy target, she said. They did not expect a stranger from another world to be standing closest to me. I asked her why she had chosen me in the first place, out of every soldier in that hall. "Because fear clouds judgment," she said. "A guard who is afraid watches the queen. A guard who is calm watches the room. You were the only one watching the room." Over the following weeks, I settled into a role I never imagined for myself. I trained properly this time, learning the actual weight and balance of the weapons I now carried, working alongside guards who had once resented my presence, and slowly began treating me as one of their own. The Chamberlain, still nervous by nature, started greeting me by name instead of simply calling me the human. The 3 men who had attacked the Queen were questioned, and eventually exchanged as part of a larger agreement between the Queen and the neighboring house responsible for hiring them. That house lost its standing at court, and its trade privileges were handed to families who had remained loyal. The Queen never spoke of the incident as something to fear. She spoke of it as proof that her judgment had been correct. As for me, I sent a message back to my old exploratory crew, letting them know I would not be returning right away. They were surprised, though not nearly as surprised as I had been standing in that hall 9 minutes into my very first watch. Some evenings, when the palace grows quiet, and the gardens outside the tall windows glow under 2 distant moons, I still think about how close that dart came to finding its mark. A few inches, a heartbeat's difference, and the whole story would have ended differently. Instead, I stand where I was chosen to stand, spear in hand, watching the room the way she once said only I seem to know how to do. And somewhere far across the galaxy, 3 men who once tried to end a queen's life still remember the name of the guard they were forced to kneel before. They call me Daniel of the Watching Eyes now, a title the Queen gave me herself, half in humor and half in respect. I never asked for it, much like I never asked to become a royal guard in the first place. But some roles find you, whether you are looking for them or not.